$220 billion is the price tag for hosting the upcoming FIFA World Cup in Doha, Qatar. The 2022 edition of the tournament is going to be the most expensive in history, and by a long mile. In comparison, the 2018 World Cup held in Russia cost around $12 billion to organize, while the previous one in Brazil in 2014 cost $15 billion. So what makes this particular World Cup so expensive, and is it worth the price tag? Stay tuned, as we will have a look at these questions in this video. In order to understand the economic side of FIFA World Cups, it is useful to first review the history of the tournament, to appreciate its importance and uniqueness in the world of international football. The history of FIFA World Cups began in 1930 with the first tournament of this kind held in Uruguay, with 13 nations taking part in the competition. Prior to that, only amateur teams had a tournament pitting the world's strongest football nations against one another at the Olympic Games from 1908 onwards. FIFA World Cup, in contrast, was meant to be a competition for professional footballers and had been several decades in the making by the time the first tournament was able to take place. Since that first tournament in Uruguay, FIFA has organized 20 more World Cups, once every 4 years, which were hosted by a total of 18 different countries. Only Italy, France, and Brazil were allowed to host more than one World Cup so far, and only 2 countries co-hosted the same tournament together, the 2002 edition held simultaneously in Japan and South Korea. Surprisingly, over almost a century that FIFA World Cups have been played, the tournament has only had a total of 8 winners. Brazil are the record holders with 5 wins, followed by Italy and Germany with 4 each. Uruguay, Argentina, and France have each won twice, while England and Spain have managed a single win over this period. Naturally, all of the history and tradition makes FIFA World Cup the most prestigious professional football competition in the world. So let's now look at the financial side of this storied tournament. When it comes to the economics of FIFA World Cups, it is useful to look at it from several different angles. The first angle is FIFA's, as the organization plays a critical role in directing most of the financial flows related to the tournament. The second is the host nations, who often have to foot enormous bills related to putting on the competition. And finally, the last lens is the teams and the players, without whom there would be no tournament in the first place. If you looked at the role of FIFA in the economics of World Cups, you'd notice the vast sums of money that it earns, which are related to the World Cup. FIFA's annual financial statements, and it's not an exaggeration, literally revolve around the tournament. Because the World Cup is only played every 4 years, FIFA's financial results are also analyzed in reference to 4 yearly cycles. For example, the organization often tends to spend more than it earns in the 3 years preceding the World Cup, and is able to recover the deficit in the year when the tournament is hosted. This is exactly what happened in the 2015-2018 World Cup cycle, when FIFA was almost $700 million negative in the first 3 years, but ended up over $1 billion positive at the end of 2018. If you go deeper into the way FIFA works, you'll notice that the majority of its income comes from something called the broadcast rights. The way they work is that FIFA organizes international football events, such as the World Cup, promotes these events to potentially interested audiences, and then sells exclusive rights to broadcast these events to a limited number of TV and streaming companies. These companies buy the rights because it allows them to draw a significant number of additional viewers to their respective channels while the tournament is underway. Higher viewership in turn means they can now sell additional advertisement during the event, often at elevated prices. As with most successful economic concepts, the main reasons it works so well are exclusivity and scarcity. FIFA would usually only sell broadcast rights to one select broadcaster per country, with nobody else allowed to televise the competition in that country during the event. This means that various potential broadcasters literally go to a bidding war in order to win the rights to televise that event, allowing FIFA to maximize the money the winning bidder would pay for those rights. The reasons the broadcasters are willing to pay exorbitant fees are the same: exclusivity and scarcity. What these broadcasters would tell their potential advertisers is that they would have a captive audience for the duration of the competition, which no other company in the country would have access to at that time. This audience tends to be highly engaged with the content, which makes it a particularly desirable target for ads. In the absence of choice and competition, if advertisers want to access these marketing opportunities, they have to pay the pretty penny. And so the cycle continues. FIFA also makes money in other ways, such as through its marketing partnerships. However, most of them pale in comparison to broadcast rights, which has become the dominant income stream for the organization in modern times. Now, let's look at the role of host nations, which are the second main ingredient in staging FIFA World Cups. The host nation is typically responsible for the tournament's infrastructure, like, for example, the stadiums, which need to be compliant with FIFA's stringent requirements around safety, pitch quality, and capacity. The host country also needs to convince FIFA that it will have sufficient accommodation capacity to receive the sudden influx of visitors, and that all the visitors can safely travel across the different venues that will host tournament games. All of this, of course, costs money. So why would host countries choose additional expenses related to staging a competition like this? The main economic reason for hosting a FIFA World Cup is to boost the national economy, which comes from three main sources: flight, train, and bus tickets for all visitors who come to watch the tournament, additional accommodation, food and drink income that local businesses can benefit from during the event, and incidental tourism revenue, which comes anytime a large influx of foreigners comes to visit the country for an event of this stature. But economic boost is definitely not the only reason why countries compete with each other so fiercely every time the right to host a FIFA World Cup is up for grabs. Given how rare the event is and how small and exclusive the list of countries that have been given the opportunity to stage the event over the years, hosting a tournament has become about national pride. As an example, Qatar prides itself as being the first country to bring the World Cup to the Gulf region, an honor which has now been forever written into history books going forward. We should also note that FIFA shares a portion of its income from the sale of broadcast and marketing rights related to the tournament, as well as the proceeds from the sale of match tickets with the host nation. This money helps to offset some of the operating costs from running the tournament, like wages for all the officials involved in staging the event. But it definitely doesn't cover the full cost, particularly if we include the cost of upgrading the infrastructure leading up to the event. As an example, it is often quoted that the majority of Qatar's $220 billion investment has been spent on things like constructing new stadiums, airports, train stations, and hotels. These costs will certainly not be recovered through Qatar's share of the proceeds from the tournament, but the country decided it was a worthwhile investment regardless. The typical rationale applied in these cases is that Qatar would likely have had to build all that infrastructure anyway at some point in a later stage of its development. So why not bring the investment forward, particularly if you can recover at least some of the costs through the income from the tournament, while allowing the country to join an exclusive club of FIFA World Cup host nations. The last angle to understanding the economics of FIFA World Cups includes football teams and players who participate in the tournament. National teams have to go through a grueling selection process leading up to the competition, so that only the strongest sides are allowed into the actual event. All of this costs money, as teams have to pay the players, coaches, medical, and other staff for their time, as well as covering the costs of the training facilities and logistics to and from pre-selection games. Why would teams do that, and is it worth it? To begin with, it's useful to remember that national teams, unlike professional football clubs, are not-for-profit institutions. They tend to be funded by national football federations, which in turn get their money from taxpayer funds, which get collected and distributed by national governments under the auspices of various sports-related ministries. Furthermore, unlike professional clubs, national teams rarely take on large private sponsorships, which is why you almost never see private sponsor logos displayed on national team jerseys. Therefore, participating in international football competitions is primarily a matter of national prestige and representation, rather than being an economic topic. That said, what's interesting about the World Cup is that FIFA sets aside a large chunk of the money it makes from the tournament into a prize fund. As an example, Qatar World Cup in 2022 is expected to have a prize fund totaling $440 million, or around 10% of FIFA's expected total income for the year. This money will be split among all the participants, with the value increasing the further a team goes in the tournament. The winner of the competition is expected to take home just over $40 million, while the runner-up is looking at the pretty sum of $30 million as well. A large chunk of this money is likely to be distributed to individual players to motivate them to do better in their games and reward them for particularly good performances. Having looked at the economics of FIFA World Cups through all these various angles, let's now try to pull it all back together. The overarching conclusion that we can draw is that the iconic competition is as much about national pride and prestige as it is about money. The economic side of it shouldn't be underestimated, however, and the history of the World Cups is full of money-related scandals, such as numerous investigations related to potential corruption charges in the wake of awarding the World Cup to Qatar and Russia in the last decade. That said, money doesn't seem to be the primary driver across the board, at least not for the host nations and most of the football teams participating in the event, as it is very hard to see them making significant net returns from staging or participating in the tournament, unless you make it to the last several rounds. If that is indeed so, this would be quite a refreshing case in today's world, which is so strongly driven by economics and money in most spheres of contemporary life. Sport should be about more than just money. And in this particular case, it looks like it still might be.